situation of another accord as opposed to John Howard's work choices, and very deliberate language there from the Prime Minister in terms of saying there've been fault on both sides of the argument in getting a simpler and better industrial relations system. He just says it isn't fit for purpose, that there needs to be reform. Bob Hawke came to power in 1983 during a recession, and his pledge was consensus, and he produced from that the Prices and Incomes Accord with the union movement, got more agreement through the Conciliation and Arbitration Commission with the union movement and employers, so we didn't have stagflation, that jobs could be created. And it seems Scott Morrison, even though he's from the other side of the fence, it appears to be mimicking that to some extent. He's seen what's happened in terms of the work between the unions and the government, particularly ACTU President Sally McManus and IR Minister Christian Porter, as they sought to enable the JobKeeper legislation to come into effect, where employers had to say to employees, you've got to cut a certain amount of hours. And we saw that sort of language from the Prime Minister, or the put your weapons down. We'll have a listen to all that in a minute. But interesting, I think Greg Combet really has had a big role in this. The former Labor Minister, the former Maritime Union of Australia boss and ACTU boss, he's worked on the COVID Commission with the federal government. I think he's been instrumental in getting a relationship between the government and Sally McManus, and I'm aware that in the lead up to this setting up of working groups, Scott Morrison and Sally McManus have had several conversations. It hasn't just been Christian Porter, it's been the Prime Minister and the President of the ACTU, the head of the ACTU. So really significant movement here, and one you might not expect from a coalition government, but one that Scott Morrison sees as integral in terms of actually getting the outcomes to create more jobs. We've heard from him before on manufacturing, on the value of the gas industry and skills today as well. But really the significant thing was the different approach to IR. And he took ownership of it too, Kieran. He said basically, it will be up to me to deliver this. I guess he's seen the strength of his negotiating skills through that National Cabinet process. The National Cabinet, his idea, he came in one day and said, this is what we need to do to get through this crisis. And now he finds these 5 working groups, various elements of industrial relations, and dumping that ensuring integrity bill they've been trying to get up for years. So this wedges Labor a bit too. Going around Labor to work with the union movement, interesting development there. Anyway, let's have a listen to what Scott Morrison had to say on working together earlier.
Skills, industrial relations, energy and resources, higher education, research and science, open banking, the digital economy, trade, manufacturing, infrastructure and regional development, deregulation, federation reform, a tax system to support jobs and investment. Now, the challenges are enormous, and you'll be pleased to know I'm not going to go through all of those this afternoon. But wherever possible, I can assure you of this, I will seek to bring people together to define and achieve the change we need to in all of these areas.
It was one of Scott Morrison's best performances and speeches as Prime Minister, I think, Andrew. And what it does, I guess, is give his sense of where the political landscape is as they launch into the recovery from COVID. This was the first time he's put his head up, you know, in this recovery mood or phase of the crisis, and in a big way, I mean, a major set-piece speech. And as I say, I think he did really well, and that idea of 5 working groups makes a lot of sense. Well,
he was very passionate, wasn't he? Very passionate. But ultimately, the test will be on whether he can get success through those working groups. The way he was talking, he seems to have some confidence that he will. And I would say that his conversations with business groups, which he alluded to, and Sally McManus, have given him that confidence because, and I guess, as I say, his performance through National Cabinet, he seems to really believe the PM that he can land something here, and wouldn't that be positive? Now, let's have a look at, if we can, at the 5 key areas these working groups will work in. Our colleague Tom Connell pointed out before that there might be something very deliberate to this, Kieran. It's a good point in terms of if one of these things falls over, it doesn't mean the whole thing falls over. So it's award simplification, enterprise agreements. Well, we're always hearing they're complicated. They end up in businesses underpaying people because of the complexities and the number of these things. Casuals and fixed-term workers. Well, on the Labor side, they say there are just too many casuals casuals, but it'll be interesting to see how the government approaches that, because business probably likes it as it is. Compliance and enforcement, well, that's the ensuring integrity matter. Not sure we'll see that much in relation to that going forward if the unions have anything to do with it. And then greenfields agreements. He sees IR as a key area. He also kind of sees federation reform and tax reform, but he didn't want to outline the specifics yet, Kieran, and I'd say that's for a very deliberate reason. We've seen 1 million people lose their jobs, and that's outside of the people kept in their jobs by JobKeeper. It's not the time to come forward with that big, bold reform proposal in a sense. That can come in the October budget when we're all more used to the situation that we're currently in. But it is the time to lay down some markers, and he did that. And it is also the time, from his point of view, from what he says, to come together, for us all to work together. And you know, he's a bit of a fighter, a pugilist usually, Scott Morrison. So this whole process, I think he's undergone a bit of a personality change. His new market really is as the great negotiator. And full marks to him putting his hand up and saying he'll be tested on the basis of how that goes the next 6 months. Let's have a listen to what else he had to say.
Our current system is not fit for purpose, especially given the scale of the jobs challenge that we now face as a nation. Our industrial relations system has settled into a complacency of unions seeking marginal benefits and employers closing down risks, often by simply not employing anyone. The system has lost sight of its purpose to get the workplace settings right so the enterprise, the business, can succeed, so everybody can fairly benefit from their efforts and their contributions. It is a system that has to date retreated to tribalism, conflict and ideological posturing. No side of that debate has been immune from those maladies. This will need to change, or more Australians will unnecessarily lose their jobs and more Australians will be kept out of jobs. Now, the first step is to get everyone back in the room, to bring people together. In good faith, we have decided that the government will not pursue a further vote in the Senate on its ensuring integrity bill. Not pursuing a further vote, though, I hasten to caution on this bill, does not reflect any change or lack of commitment to the principle that lawful behaviour of registered organisations should be strictly required on all work sites in Australia.
What's your message to those elements of your own party who might see this as an opportunity to finally neuter the trade union movement?
Well, that is not the objective of this process. That is not the government's policy and never has been. I think everybody's got to put their weapons down on this. Everyone does. And that's what I'm hoping for. And that's what I'm seeking to achieve. And I think that's what Australians demand. And I think Australians will take a very dim view of anyone or any group or any organisation that isn't prepared to come and sit down on this table and give it a go.
One of the key elements of the government's response, Andrew, and the successful one, has been this national cabinet idea. The Prime Minister spoke on that, and that it's been a privilege of his to oversee that through this crisis. I bumped into a senior member of the government at the press club, not literally, we were 1.5 metres apart, but that individual said to me that what we've done with this IR plan is build the runway, let's see if the plane takes off. Again, they're saying, OK, let's try and be above politics here and get something decent done. It's a worthwhile goal, at least.
Well, that's the message they want out as well. And I think I said yesterday that the next election, we're already seeing Scott Morrison wants to be seen as the person in the centre. You win government from the centre, maybe to centre-right in Australia, and he wants the Labor Party and Albanese way out to the left. So, of course, there's political considerations in this approach as well. He continues to say, though, it's not ideology, and he knows that jobs is the key. It's all about the creation of jobs. And that's going to be the key in this thing. And the other important lesson out of this that Scott Morrison has, he was elected to Parliament in 2007 when John Howard lost ostensibly over the work choices issue when he tried to foist a different industrial relations system on Australia because he had control of the Senate, John Howard. And John Howard lost his seat in that election. So that's in the back of Scott Morrison's mind on IR as well. Also in the back of his mind, no doubt, is what happens to governments in a Great Depression situation. Those are the only two times a Prime Minister's lost his seat, with Stanley Bruce doing so. And we know he's been reading about the Great Depression. So he's getting as much advice as he can. He's obviously thought his way through it. He's obviously consulted. And if negotiation's the way forward and he can actually get some outcomes, well, isn't that a wonderful thing? One of the areas he'll have to do or have to work on in terms of that, of course, we know, is the Senate. And that will be an interesting negotiating platform or area for him as well. So he'll be hoping for the support of the unions in respect of that as well down the track, Kieran.